Okay, so right now, literally as you sit there, billions of tiny, totally invisible changes are happening deep inside your cells. When we hear the word mutation, I think we all kind of picture science fiction, right? But the reality is that your DNA is constantly changing every single day. And whether those microscopic changes just stop with you or alter the course of human history entirely, well, that depends on where they happen. Are they in your somatic cells or your germline cells? Let's dive into this explainer and explore the really fascinating dual nature of DNA mutations. Get this staggering statistic: 330 billion. That is the most recent estimate of how many cell divisions are happening in your body every single day. 330 billion. And with every single one of those divisions, your cellular machinery is just frantically trying to copy your entire genetic code. Out of all those daily divisions, several billion are going to contain errors. It is basically a giant microscopic game of telephone on an unimaginable scale, and it results in billions of tiny changes day in and day out. So, that brings us to a pretty profound question, right? Are you a mutant? Well, the answer, unequivocally, is yes. Because of these billions of daily cell divisions, every single one of us is what scientists actually call a genetic mosaic. We are definitely not made up of perfectly identical clones of a single cell. The journey from just one fertilized egg to an adult human takes about 100 trillion cell divisions. With that much copying going on, mutations after conception are just completely unavoidable. You are literally a mosaic of genetically distinct cells, and each one carries its own unique microscopic changes. But before we go any further, let's just make sure we're on the exact same page. What is a mutation exactly? Simply put, a mutation is a permanent, heritable change in the DNA sequence of a cell's genome. Now, it's really important to know that these endogenous errors happen randomly. And sure, the vast majority of our DNA damage is very quickly spotted and fixed by the cell's built-in proofreading systems. But sometimes, that repair just fails. And when it fails, that rare, permanent change sticks. It becomes permanently locked into that cell's genetic code. Let's look at what happens when one of those changes actually sticks at the chemical level. What we're talking about here are base pair substitutions. Normally, you have the wild type, which is just the standard sequence, but sometimes just a single letter in that genetic code gets swapped out. If a change causes a totally different amino acid to be coded, like subbing in serine, for example, that's called a missense mutation. Or even worse, you can get a nonsense mutation, where the change basically creates a stop command way too early and completely truncates the protein. So literally just one single letter changing can completely alter how a vital protein functions in your body. And here is the absolutely crucial point. When these mutations happen, they basically face a fork in the road. Their ultimate destiny depends entirely on where in your body they occur. On one side, we have somatic mutations, which are happening in the cells of your body. On the other side, we have germline mutations, which happen in your reproductive cells. These two paths have vastly different consequences, not just for you, but for the future of humanity. Let's start with somatic cells, or the body's mutations. Okay, focusing entirely on that first path, somatic cells. Soma simply means body. These are the standard cells making up your skin, your liver, your lungs, your brain. When a mutation occurs here, its impact is strictly localized. Let's trace this out. Step 1. A mutation happens in just a single somatic cell. Step 2. That specific cell divides. Step 3. The mutation is passed on to all the cells that descend from that original mutant cell. But, and this is the absolute key takeaway here, it is passed only within the original individual. If you get a somatic mutation in your arm, it might multiply to thousands of cells in your arm, but it is never going to leave your body, and there's no way it gets passed to your kids. Now, a lot of somatic mutations are just random, spontaneous hiccups in DNA replication. But others, we kind of force them upon ourselves. These are induced mutations. Things like physical or chemical insults from our environment act as direct triggers. For example, UV radiation from the sun can blast the somatic cells in your skin and cause mutations. Cigarette smoke dumps chemical mutagens straight into the somatic cells of your lungs. These environmental factors vastly speed up the rate at which our body cells accumulate genetic errors. And that perfectly illustrates the primary, real-world consequence of all these somatic mutations. If a somatic mutation happens to hit some harmless, random sequence of DNA, no big deal. But if that mutation strikes the very specific genes that control cell growth and division, the result is unregulated cell proliferation. In plain English, cancer. Cancer is fundamentally a genetic disease caused by mutations, and the vast majority of those are just random acquired somatic mutations that build up over our lifetimes. To really put the gravity of those 330 billion daily cell divisions into perspective, just look at these numbers. Roughly 85% of all cancers are caused by somatic mutations. They aren't inherited. They are just the cumulative result of living, breathing, and replicating our DNA day after day. Only about 15% of cancers are actually caused by inherited mutations that give someone a genetic predisposition to the disease. The lion's share of the risk comes right from the microscopic errors happening in our somatic tissues right now. So how does this actually build into a tumor? Well, inside our somatic cells, there are two specific types of genes that, when mutated, lead to cancer. It helps to think of your cell's growth cycle like a car. Tumor suppressors are the brakes. They normally regulate and stop runaway cell growth. If a somatic mutation destroys a tumor suppressor, it's literally like taking the brakes off the car. On the flip side, you have oncogenes, which promote growth. If a mutation makes an oncogene overactive, it's like slamming the accelerator straight to the floor. Brakes off, accelerator down, and that is exactly how somatic mutation drives a tumor.
All right, let's switch gears to germline cells, the inherited legacy.
Taking the second path on our fork in the road, we arrive at germline cells. These are your reproductive cells, the sperm and the eggs. And here is the critical distinction we really need to understand. A mutation in a germline cell might not affect the parent at all. The parent could be 100% healthy. But because that single cell is the blueprint for the entire next generation, any mutation it carries is going to be copied into every single cell of the offspring's body. The mutation essentially escapes the individual, passing down to their children, their grandchildren, and potentially generations to come.
The gravity of this becomes heartbreakingly clear when we look at inherited genetic diseases, specifically single gene disorders. Things like cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease, hemophilia. These are devastating conditions, and they are the direct result of point mutations in germline cells. Think back to that single swapped letter of code we talked about earlier. Just one single base pair substitution in a germline cell can permanently alter a protein, and that typo echoes down through a family tree, affecting descendants for centuries.
This also brings up a totally fascinating and kind of hidden phenomenon called germline mosaicism. Basically, a person who has a substantial proportion of mutant germline cells will produce some normal reproductive cells, but also some mutant ones. What this means in practice is that a perfectly normal, healthy parent might have had a mutation happen really early in their own embryonic development that only affected their germ cell precursors. So they are totally fine, but they're carrying this hidden population of mutant reproductive cells, which drastically increases the risk of passing a severe disorder to their kids. And what's really wild is that sometimes germline mutations literally cheat the system. Take achondroplasia, which is a common single gene disorder that causes dwarfism. It's almost always caused by a highly specific mutation at one single nucleotide. But here is the crazy part. The mutation actually promotes its own transmission. Scientists call it a selfish mutation. It gives the mutant male germline cells a proliferative advantage, meaning they multiply faster and make up a disproportionate amount of the sperm pool. The mutation biologically rigs the game to make sure it gets passed on. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the evolutionary paradox, a macro perspective. Up until now, we've been looking at all this micro-level damage. But if we zoom way out, we actually have to completely flip the narrative to understand the ultimate evolutionary paradox. Yes, the vast majority of mutations are harmful or neutral, but a very, very small percentage are actually beneficial. And without those rare beneficial germline mutations being passed down, life on Earth would just be completely stagnant. Germline mutations are the original source of genetic variation. They are the raw material that natural selection operates on. Every new trait, every adaptation to a changing environment, and ultimately the appearance of entirely new species, all of that is the legacy of germline mutations. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The very same microscopic errors that cause devastating diseases and unregulated tumors in our individual bodies are the exact same mechanism that created the rich, breathtaking diversity of life on Earth over billions of years. Without mutations, there is no evolution. There is no us. So as you go about your day-to-day with 330 billion cells actively dividing inside you right now, ask yourself, are mutations our biggest biological flaw, or are they actually our greatest feature? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this totally changed how you view your own biology. Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.